There we go. It's that easy. So we were just talking about you being born in Asia.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
no, go
Okay.
ahead.
So I'll go ahead. I'll talk about how I was born in China in 92, so I'm 28 right now. And when I was 4, I moved to Japan to live with my dad because he worked as a software engineer there. And then came here when I was about 6.5, 7, and then spent the rest of my life here before going to college and then studying abroad in London and Milan. And then coming back to Texas because I absolutely love being close to my hometown. I think Texas has a lot more to offer in terms of like quality of life. Nowhere in the world beats Houston, Texas, I think.
You're gonna win a lot of listeners with that one for sure. That's a very true. I think it's true. Like so, inside the United States, we have gone outside to Costa Rica and Mexico, but inside the United States, I would have to say, like quality of life. There's very few places that stack up to this as far as income versus what you can get with that income versus like the people and the access to things and all sorts of stuff like that. There's just so many job opportunities. Texas just provides a lot of different things. I would not say like most, like even my dad, like, Texas is the best state in the union and it's just all Texas, Texas, Texas. There's definitely way prettier states. Like there's way more enjoyable places to go and see. The people are just as nice in these other places. But quality of living, it's hard to beat Texas for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was shocked because when I lived in Italy, um, central AC was not a thing. Most of the houses didn't even have air conditioning in it. And when I was living there, it was like the hottest summer in 10 years. So it was 42 degrees Celsius, which equates to like 90 something
Oh
Fahrenheit.
man.
And we just had to bake in our apartments and survive off of like popsicles and showers. And that was it. And that
90
was just a
degree.
huge culture shock. You think, yeah, you'd
Whoa.
think, living in a first world country, they'd have air conditioning, but it's very rare. Even in places like New York, you're most likely going to be staying in a room with a window unit as opposed to, and no dryer washers in the apartments either. You would have to carry your laundry down the block and sit in a laundromat. That kind of stuff. I mean, it flew with me when I was maybe 18 years old, but I'm older now. I'm a little lazy, higher standards, so it's out of the question.
Yeah, people do not like just going to different places, getting Airbnbs and seeing the life. And then my wife is actually like some of our best friends live in New York. They live, I guess, Syracuse now, and they used to live in New York. And it's just like she would tell me stories about their apartment, and you're going, dude, it's crazy what people are accustomed to, like what's normal for them. So it's normal for us to have a 3 bedroom home that's 1,600 square feet. That's just like average. Like you're just a small average home here in Texas. But like up there, it's like literally 400 square feet of living area. And you're like, dude, I'm living high on the hog. I don't have a roommate.
Oh, let me tell you a story about my time in New York. Um, I went to FIT, which is on 27th and 7th. It's in the Chelsea area. So I lived across the street on the other corner, which is 26th and 7th. And my apartment was 2 blocks down from Nick Jonas's apartment. So sometimes we'd see him in passing. But let me tell you, okay, so I lived 2 blocks away from Nick Jonas when my apartment was rat infested, and there was a brothel 1 floor below my room. And that's probably where the rats were coming from. And halfway into moving in, the guy got evicted, and there were cops everywhere for a while. And then all the rats and bed bugs just went everywhere. And it was just a very traumatic experience. But that's New York, you know. You could be partying with celebrities in meatpacking, and then you go home to uh, your little apartment in the Lower East Side and just be stalked by a horde of rats on your walk back into your apartment. I mean, that was my experience. It's just like night and day. Nothing like it here in Texas, that's for sure.
That is such like if you think of the things in New York, that is such a New York story right there. It is such a New York story. All right, well let's
I mean, would
talk
I
about
trade?
your company.
Yeah,
Let's talk about your company.
yeah, yeah.
Um because I mean we already got background of where you live, which is I mean, it's fascinating that you moved all over the place. And this is even more fascinating that you've started this watch company and like tell me a little bit about what that's about.
Yeah, I think, well, so before I talk about this company in detail, I kind of want to go about my philosophy in design and philosophy in life. I've always been someone that likes to take things that um, are maybe broken or things that are discarded and give them a little bit of attention, a little bit of TLC, and sort of create something out of it that has value and that has sort of a sentimental feeling that you can pass on from one person to another. I mean, everything has a story, and that really resonates with me as a person. And this spirit of like rebuilding from nothing was first inspired by my great grandmother. So, my great grandmother lived in communist China back in, well, way back in the day. I don't know what year exactly, but she was married to a wealthy businessman. So my great grandfather was a very successful businessman. From what I know, he worked in the steel industry and he owned a couple of factories. And my great grandmother was the fifth concubine. And so when the communists took over, they destroyed everything that they owned. They burned down all the factories and took everything that we had and exiled my great grandfather to Siberia, and that was the last we've heard of him. So, it's kind of natural for us to all assume that he died on the journey there.
Well,
Now, my great grandmother had,
what was their
yeah,
reason for taking the like did they give any reason? I mean, I know communism. I know enough about it to where what you hear, right? And I know the philosophy, I know the history and all that good stuff, but you're speaking from somebody who's had family like live through this sort of situation, which is wild. Like it's a crazy impactful thing to think he's a wealthy businessman and then everything just got taken from like he didn't have a choice. There was no court, there was no lawsuit, there was no freedom. It was just like take it and we burned it to the ground.
yeah, they destroyed everything. They burned all the books. They destroyed the schools. Kids in that generation didn't even get to receive an education. And they did it all in um, I guess, the name of seeking equal playing grounds or equality for everybody, which is something that is extremely well, not it's not extremely necessary, but I think it's fair to try to seek equality, but not at the cost of millions of lives. I don't think that's very fair. But they did end up doing that to my ancestors, and um, I wouldn't say that I'm deeply affected negatively by it. I think it's not worth it to hold on to a grudge for this long, but I am very inspired by the actions that my great grandmother took after all of this happened to her. So she had bound feet, and in China, they would bind little girls' feet. So she had maybe like 3 inches on her, like she had like little 3 inch stubs that she had to walk on. So she basically couldn't walk a couple of feet away from her bed. She was bedbound pretty much her whole life. And she had to raise 7 kids on her own after losing her husband. But she didn't really falter at all. She was a very avid Buddhist, and she, meditated every day, and she instilled this spirit um, of strength and embracing knowledge and putting a value on education. And so she raised all 7 kids on her own, and she actually was very successful. So there were a lot of highly successful people in my grandparents' generation. I think we had 2 or 3 doctors. My grandma was one of them. And this was during the Communist Revolution. So I think it's a huge feat for her to be able to raise so many successful children. And it's something that still to this day, I get very emotional talking about it, because I think she's just such an inspiration in my life. And I want to spend the rest of my day living up to her, and catching up to her. I don't think I ever will, but sorry, I'm tearing up a little bit. But,
That's okay. That's okay. It's a wild story. And I actually, so when I was younger, I saw a documentary on I don't know how I came across it, but it was of the history of binding the feet, and what it does and the process and all that. And I was like, I can't believe human beings do this as like a tradition, or like it's like a thing that they did. And I'm going, that's incredible. Like, it sounds really painful. And what you described, like with that, but basically, I mean, my little knowledge is they just wrap their feet super duper tight from a young age so that they keep the woman's foot the same size. So it's because it's dainty, it's supposed to be like a woman's foot is supposed to be small and slender. And so it grows and the bones just kind of crunch up and they just like form. Like the bones are still growing and everything, but it's like wrapped up in this thing. So then it morphs into like almost a different body part.
Oh yeah, if you look at pictures on Google, I don't suggest it to anyone watching this podcast, but if you do, it's grotesque, and I don't recommend it. But it's, we've had it in different cultures. Like there's corsets in the Western culture. There's, neck stretching. I don't know what culture that was, but there's these ladies with like 3-foot necks out there somewhere. And so, yeah, it's a different day and age. I'm glad I don't have to bind my feet. I'm very comfortable wearing flip-flops. So I'm very glad I grew up this year, day and age.
It just brings perspective as to what you were saying. Like, it's really an impactful thing, even for me. And when I heard you say something, it's going to be something that's going to stick with me, because we had a food service, my grandpa and everything, he built it up and it was super successful. And then when we sold it back in 2000, but our attorneys messed up where we got absolutely nothing for it. So we went from all this to zero, right? And what your statement of you don't like to hold on to the past, that's exactly like the way you worded it is exactly the way our family handled that whole situation. And I have a lot of respect for my dad, and my grandpa raised him to be that way. And then my dad's reaction to it, it was exact like you described my feelings better than I have been able to describe when he said you don't like to hold on to the past, but you're inspired by their actions of what they did and how they handled these tough situations, just to bring perspective. But the fact that I know somebody who has had family members that feet were bound is wild, because I've seen that doc. I don't think a lot of people know about that. That's why it's fascinating to me as far as that. She is a G. Your grandmother is a gangster for sure.
Yeah, and she's a trendsetter. So she was a vegan, and this is way before the Americans picked it up. But yeah, she was this little like 4'9" little lady who weighed like 80 pounds, and she was just the boss. She was telling everybody, "Hey, you go do that. You go do that." At least from my grandparents and great aunts and.
Dude, there's no way you can raise 7 kids without being like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Especially when they don't go to school, so they're all running around and, it's chaos outside. I don't know how she did it, but she did. And love you, Grandma. But,
that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, so, but wrapping back to that idea of, rebuilding from nothing, I feel like my entire life has been surrounded with this philosophy, because even in my generation, it wasn't the best life in China. I mean, we had a decent life, but it wasn't great. Like we got rationed food. Our milk came in little plastic baggies. and they would deliver it once a week, and it wasn't even real milk. It was like powdered milk mixed with water, and that's all you got. Everybody got food stamps and that kind of thing. We got government issued housing, and so my dad especially was looking for a better life outside of the country, and so he brought us here. And in doing so, he sacrificed all of his accolades that he accumulated while he was in China. He is a very, very smart man. He got into some of the best universities in China, and he worked very hard to get there, but he gave all of that up for me. And so we got here. He had no money. We have the stereotypical Asian immigrant story. You come here with like $500 in your pocket, and you start from nowhere, and you build all the way up. And so my dad and my great grandma are two of the most inspirational people in my life. And this whole idea of just seeing value, even though it's not necessarily there yet, but just taking it and building it up and creating something amazing from it really translates to everything that I do today. And so, long story short, this philosophy that I have in life gets translated into these watches, because I do see the beauty in pieces that might not be usable on supercars anymore. And you take these parts and you can turn them into something that becomes a conversational piece, maybe 20, 30 years down the line, when petroleum cars are a thing in the past and we just have a bunch of Teslas driving around all the time. Then you can hand this off to your grandchildren and be like, hey, this came from a Lamborghini. You know what a Lamborghini is, right? Who knows, right? This is something that I think will preserve a story and the spirit of a Lamborghini, and maybe something that will turn into a very sentimental collectible down the line.
Why Lamborghinis? Like, and first off, so what she's making watches out of Lamborghinis, right? That's what you're making?
Yeah, and they're handmade in Switzerland, so they're good. They're gonna last you a while.
And so what made you choose Lamborghinis? Like, why Lamborghinis?
I chose Lamborghinis because I remember when I was in middle school, one of the kids, like the teacher went around asking all the kids, what did you want when you grew up, or what did you want to be? And a couple of the boys there immediately went, I want to drive a Lamborghini when I grow up. And to me, it really stuck, because it seems like Lamborghini is one of those cars that becomes an aspirational icon for little children. And they're using it as a goal to work towards when they get older. It's a symbol of success for a lot of people. Even my mentor, he worked really, really hard to get to the point where he can purchase supercars. And the first one that made him really, really happy was the Lamborghini Murcielago that he got. And he told me, he's like close to 40 years old. But when he got that car, he was giddy like a little schoolboy, because he knew he made it. That was it for him. And I wanted to take that and put it into a watch and make it affordable for a lot of these, maybe younger people who haven't made it there just yet, but you can have a little piece of that and have it as a reminder that, hey, I'll get there one day.
So what goes into this? Like, how do you get the salvaged Lamborghini? This is a question I had. I saw the pictures on the Instagram, and I know you said you got to update it, which is fine. But I saw the pictures, and I'm trying to figure out, the watch is amazing looking. Everybody listening, you can see a picture on my Instagram. You can go to her Instagram and see pictures. Michael Satterfield, I'll put a link to the story he just put out, doing a review on your watch, because it's really good, and you'll see a lot of pictures of it, like on his wrist, and he's actually using it. But they're really slick looking watches. Like, they look awesome, and they look very classy. Sometimes, like, I love watches. I don't have mine on right now because I take them off when I'm taking care of the baby and whatnot, and I was putting the baby to sleep. But Um, that watches make me feel so confident. I say that in like, it sounds cheesy, but they do. I love wearing a watch. I hate checking my phone for the time. I feel like I'm put together. And even though I don't, I wear t-shirts and flip-flops all the time or whatever. I feel better when I wear a watch. So what was like, where do you get these cars to put these, like, where do you get the salvaged cars to make the parts out of? And then how does that process go into the guy in Switzerland that's making the watches?
Yeah, sure. So this first Lamborghini, I actually had to purchase the part from a scrapyard, and it was sitting there for, I believe, over 3 years, and nobody picked it up, and it was just in the back. When we went there, it looked so sad. It was just sitting in the back, and nobody was paying attention to it. I mean, because no one wants to buy a busted Lamborghini part because they can't put it on their car. What are they going to do? Like maybe hang it on the wall, but then why don't you just get a new one, right? And so, um, partially, uh, part of our inventory is purchased, but I also, during this process of building this company, made some connections, and they're more than happy to donate pieces that they don't want anymore, especially because they know it's going towards good cause. So these watches, not only are we making them from recycled supercar parts, we're also donating a portion of the proceeds that we make to Habitat for Humanity. Again, the spirit of rebuilding. And so that really excites the people that are donating their parts. And we actually have a few that are willing to put put some good stuff in the pipeline. So stay tuned.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And I imagine it's pretty cool for the people who have the Lamborghini to donate those. Like, oh, yeah, heck yeah, my car is going to be in a watch on somebody's wrist.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also, I don't want to spill the beans too much, but we're working on creating a line where we make one-off watches that are very just 100% customizable to the wearer. You can get an automatic movement, you can get a tourbillon movement, you can get whatever you want. We'll work with you on the design and we'll make it from your car. And we've had a couple of potential customers that really expressed genuine interest for this. So that's also in the works.
Whoa, that's awesome. If I had the money to own a Lamborghini, which that wouldn't be my choice in car, but I like old four-wheel drive things. However,
Yeah.
so let's say I have an old four-wheel drive, like I've got an old Toyota FJ or Land Cruiser, and I have a chance to give you a piece of that Toyota, and you can make me a watch out of this old thing, and then I'm driving around my vehicle, but I also have a watch on that's made from that vehicle. That's such a cool idea. That's a great idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're thinking about not just like the cars of these owners, but maybe their grandfathers, their um, old, I don't know, Porsche 911 just sitting in the garage, needs a little bit of fixing, and they want to keep a piece of that just for sentimental value because that car means so much to them. And so you give me a piece of this, and then I'll, make a watch that really symbolizes not just the car, but also the emotions, and incorporate pieces of your grandfather, maybe inscribe some memorable quotes that he's said during his lifetime, and just make it a really personal timepiece for you. And this is all possible because of my good friend over in Switzerland. He's been working in the watch industry for the last 30, 40 years. He's worked for all of the most esteemed, or not all of them, but a lot of the most esteemed luxury Swiss watch brands like JLC and I think a couple of others, but I can't name them off the top of my head. But our production line is actually recognized by the Federation over there, which means that, our quality is comparable to that of like Rolex and Patek Philippe and all these like very, very high-end brands. And so that once you're working with us, your watch is in good hands.
So what I'm picturing, like if you want to make it out of a Lamborghini door, you just ship the door over to Switzerland. That guy starts cutting it up or by hand. You know, he receives a Lamborghini door and he just starts like toot toot toot, and then he makes this like he does his thing and makes it. What's the process like? Do you know how when you like how do you send a part to him and then how does he like work his magic with that piece of equipment to turn it into this small thing that tells time?
Yeah, so we actually do all the processing of the hood here in Texas. So we have a couple of contractors that we're working with to not only, strip the paint very carefully and ensure that, we preserve as much of workable material as we can, but we also do the flattening and the machining here so that we ship it all. By the time we ship it all to Switzerland, it's ready for them to then place in the watches, but they'll do some correction work over there because they're very precise. They need everything down to the accuracy of 0 0.5 millimeters. And so they're insane over there. They're very, very crazy about accuracy. And then they'll work their magic over there and put it together into a watch. But to answer your question, we have a team here in Houston working on our parts as well.
Where did you meet this guy over in Switzerland? Like, how does somebody who travels the world is from China that lives in Texas meet a Swiss watchmaker?
Honestly, I just emailed him and he emailed back. I told him about my idea and he's like, I love it. All right, let's do something. And that was it. I met him online.
That's awesome. So, did you do research to know like this guy's awesome? Like, he's an awesome watchmaker, and I got this idea, and you sent it to him. Like, so you
Yeah.
knew this guy was a really. That is so awesome. That's just like
Yeah. You'd be surprised the kind of people you meet on the internet.
no, but it's just wild that you what you did. Like, you have an idea. That have you been into watches? Like, have you done any sort of thing like this before?
Yeah, so I was actually working on a watch business before I started this collection. But we had all of our manufacturers in China, and we did that practice run. I always wanted to do Swiss watches, but I needed the practice. So I worked with some bigger manufacturers over there and got my bearings, and then moved over to Switzerland. And my favorite watch, the Nomos. I love the Bauhaus designs. I love minimalism, like classic minimalism, and just um, personally speaking, I love anything that's classic all the way up to minimalist. Not really into the in your face, like Hublot and Jacob and Co. I'm sorry for calling some watch brands out, but it's not my style. Um, but yeah, I've been into watches for quite some time.
It's something funny you said about that because uh, when I was listening to somebody talk about like Silence of the Lambs as a movie, and they were saying all the good movies, like the best movies, most of them are made timeless. Like they on purposely made Silence of the Lambs timeless, where like white T-shirts and as timeless as you could. So if we watch it now, we're not going to be just like, oh, whoa, that was way back in the day. Look at that thing. You know what I mean? I feel like classic, like what you're talking minimalist class, that's never going to go away. So that style will never go away. The big in your face, like that will eventually fade out and it'll just be like, oh, it'll be like a calculator watch, you know? Like, oh, remember when we used to wear those? That was cool.
Yeah.
Uh, but the classic part, there's something, think about you're doing cars, right? You're doing your cars. Think about all the things that have lasted forever. It's the ones that are classic. Nobody goes, that 98 Ford Taurus is the bomb, you know?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, my favorite car of all time, Aston Martin 177. Just gorgeous, gorgeous car. I I think it has great performance, but I could care less about the performance on that car. It's just everything about it is just so aesthetically pleasing. Just from the interior to the headlights, the taillights, the doors, everything about it is just so classically amazing and impeccably designed. And that gives you maybe a little peek into what my personal style is.
So how did you get started in like this wanting to own your own business? You came over here, you said, with nothing, the typical immigrant story. And for people who like may not know, like, but I have the utmost respect um, for that story and the people that go through it, because when you're born over here, and this is perspective, when you travel, you get a lot of this stuff. Like we were talking beforehand about traveling and the education that you get from that, and that you get to see all these different things. And like when you're born here, it can be very easy to just take things for granted, even if you're not well off. Like you've got a house, you've got this, you've got that. These immigrants that move over, and I don't know if you're in the same boat, but like they move over, they live in the back room of whatever business they're trying to start and build a better life for. And like with all their kids and their family, and they're not making a ton of money, and they work so hard day in and day out to build something for their future and their kids and all of this stuff. It's crazy. And if the people who grew up here knew the advantage they have like that and worked the same way, they would all be successful. There would be no complaining about all of this stuff. So I'm fascinated to know, when you got over here with very little money, you and your family, like where did the process go from there to get to now where you're making watches?
Yeah, I always joke to my friends I'm probably the most patriotic person out of all of them. I say, I love the United States. I have no complaints here. I love it here. And it's because when we got here, it really is the land of opportunity. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but that's just how I think. When we got here, we really had nothing, but the people here were so warm and welcoming, and they just took us in and they took care of us. I mean, we couldn't even speak. We were living under the poverty line, and they nurtured us into who we are today. So I can't even say that I got here or my family got here on our own. It's all the people in the communities that helped us and supported us. My teachers growing up, teaching me English and being really patient with me, because I was kind of a feisty little kid, and they really understood that maybe someone from a different culture has different tendencies, and they really just stuck their neck out for me, and eternally grateful for all the people that came into my life and took care of me. And there was some sentiment that I had of wanting to give back to this country. And I didn't know what exactly to do, but I always knew that I wanted to start my own business, because then I can do something that is socially focused or environmentally focused in some way that can essentially fulfill my dream of creating a better community within the city that I live in. And so ever since I was 16, I wanted to start my own company. I didn't have the slightest clue what I was going to do, but every day I would stare at the ceiling when I get home and ask myself, well, I know what I want to do. How am I going to get there? And eventually, after going to design school, after meeting all these people in my life, they guided me in this direction, and that's how I got here today.
So design school, figuring out how, I've said this before, and I've kind of gone through the process of, I want to own my own thing. I want to do my own business. I want to, that's a passion of mine. It's not for money. It's for freedom. And I already work hard enough, and I know I'll work hard enough. Why am I pouring that into somebody else's stuff, right? Even though I may love my boss and all that good stuff. Why? For me, it's just not what I necessarily want and feel like, I don't know, I don't want to say called to do, but it's just not, it's something, I just want that other aspect. I've lived it before, and I want to have that again for my family too. Like that's part of something that I want to share and want to do. But you knowing at 16, me, I don't know what I want to do, and like, I'm starting to feel like I got to do something. And I'm 30 years old, 30, and I'm like, I want to do something. I really need to figure out something. What's my path in life? I don't know what I've been working so long for these other businesses. What is my meaning in life? Like, where are my passions? What do I love to do? Find what you love to do, and you'll never work a day. What do I love to do? You're 16, you're starting to think about it, but what does that process look like? Like, how do you figure it out? You bounce from one thing to the other? Do you try a bunch of different things? Like, did you have any other idea other than design that you wanted to go into?
Oh, absolutely. I've had a a number of failed ventures before I got here. Um, the first thing I wanted to be was, believe it or not, a singer. I wanted to be a pop star. I mean, like every 16-year-old girl wanted to be a pop star. And so I trained really hard for it. But my dad had the foresight. He's like, you don't want to be in the entertainment industry. It's not friendly. If you want, create something for yourself and stick to your morals, no matter where you are in life. Be a good person and make decisions based off of whether or not you think it will harm other people. And at that point, I was like, okay, so if I'm not going to be a singer, what's the next thing I can do? Well, I've been drawing since I was 4. I would say I'm more artistically inclined than I am mathematically or science, STEM inclined. So I decided to pursue kind of a career in design. So I experimented first with just general fine arts, then went into graphic design, then it went into fashion design, and then ultimately, during my last year, went into accessories design. And that was the year that I was studying abroad in Milan, and I met a professor there. Her name is Professor Spadafora. She spearheaded the sustainable fair trade movement in the fashion industry. So she spoke at the UN quite a few times. She's someone that I really look up to. And I asked her, how did you start your business? Can you help me start mine? And we spent weeks and months just hashing out ideas. She helped me make my first business plan. And that first business that I had with her was one that was centered around giving the homeless in Milan a voice. So I would go around and try to speak to panhandlers and ask them to, tell me their stories, and then I would turn them into designs, and then give a portion of those proceeds to nonprofits that would then help the homeless population there. Unfortunately, it didn't really pan out before my visa ended, so I had to come back and figure something else out. But it was a really great learning experience because I then realized how important it is to have business acumen. It's not just about making a good product. It's not just about creating fancy designs. It's about the accounting, and it's about, the legal stuff, and, all the other stuff that's involved in making a business. And that's why I'm doing my MBA right now, because I'm playing catch up.
And there is so much stuff, but you also, it seems like you like to just take action immediately. It doesn't seem like you sit and think about it for a second, like, oh wait, it's going to be scary to go talk to a bunch of homeless people in a different country, and how does this work? I don't know that I can do that. That seems a little weird and sketchy. Maybe I might find some. No, you just went for it. You're like, okay, cool, let's do it.
Yeah, I was kind of young and dumb. I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. I almost got in trouble a couple of times, but it's all right. I still made it. I'm here. I'm alive. So that's good. But would I do it today? I probably do it still, but with a lot more caution.
Yeah, but that's it.
Definitely.
You'd still do it. You'd still do it, and that's one thing that
Yeah.
I was actually just talking on my last podcast. And it's one thing to say it. It's one thing to say I want to start my own business at 16, whatever. I want to start my own business. It's another thing to take action on that what you said. My wife, I credit her for a lot of things because when I say something, she is like, I mean, and she is, if you say it, you better do it. Like, she does not like it. The just words don't work. It's action, 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 and that's in everything that goes along with it. Which it just makes me better at everything I do because I say, hey, I think I want to start a podcast. Oh, well, then start a podcast. Like that's it. I better not say another word
Yeah.
about it unless I start a podcast. Like that's the way this thing works. And so you didn't just say it. You actually went on and did it. And that's a scary thing for most people.
Yeah, and I think a great way to motivate yourself and stay motivated is just always stay uncomfortable. Never spoil yourself with telling people your goals. Never spoil yourself with, um, you know, little luxuries in life more than you should have. I had the privilege, I like to say, of growing up poor. So I always had big dreams and I always was able to stay motivated. It's a lot harder for someone to grow up who grew up in a family that just gave them everything to say, oh, I want to toss all of this aside and risk failing and losing everything. No, like obviously they're going to stay where they are because they're comfortable there. And so, personally speaking, just make sure you're as uncomfortable and unhappy as you possibly can be, and you'll start. Eventually, you start working on your goals. I guarantee you.
So when you say like, I don't want to say deprive yourself. I forgot how you worded it exactly, but man, it's a really good point of not necessarily unhappy, but you don't let yourself have
Like have a
like everything, right?
yeah, light a fire under. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you stay motivated. That's how you tell yourself and you stay motivated. I mean, so it's kind of like it's as anything. It's like with money too. I mean, if you want to have money, you need to not spend it on every Starbucks or go out to eat or do that. You know, stay in, eat. Uh, the whole Dave Ramsey thing, rice and beans. You can say all you want. That philosophy works. We've I learned that firsthand, and it took a long time. And it actually went from my wife wanting to do what she absolutely like follow her dream and her like her little passion in life and change jobs, and that split our income in half, and we were fine, but we didn't realize how much money we were wasting until we went over this detail by detail, nickel and dimed everything, and then we just eliminated all the things that we could. I mean everything. And not only did we end up being just fine cutting our income in half, which we weren't living like crazy high on the hog. Like it wasn't anything, very modest. Like we didn't even have really that much of a savings account. But then when we did all that, we cut our income in half. We ended up saving up to buy a house and then having, building up a savings account. You're like, wait a second. If I had done this back then, what would we have had now, And so you learn that just not giving yourself these little tiny pleasures that really mean nothing. Like my life is no different than it was then. It's absolutely no different, So it's like I don't even miss those little things. So what you're saying really rings true, and I've just lived it. So that's wild. That's how you motivate yourself. You just don't give yourself those little tiny like luxuries. You stay a little bit uncomfortable.
Exactly, exactly.
So what?
And also, I mean, don't forget to reward yourself when good things happen. Take yourself out to dinner. I know I used to watch Graham Stephan a lot. Yeah, Graham Stephan, I think his name. And he would always reward himself with like a McDonald's. He's a millionaire investor. He always touts about his 50-cent coffee. But I mean, in order for you to get there, you got to save money because otherwise the funnel is going to be completely vertical. And the output is just exactly the same as the input. You're not saving anything.
Well, that's part of the thing is like there's a lot of people that would look at you and be like, "Man, she's just had things. Maybe you've had things given to you, or they might go like, oh, it's easy for her, right? Seeing you now, this is the finished product. This is the Jenna. You're starting a bit. You're a business owner. You're making Lamborghini watches, so they're high end things from a Swiss watchmaker, and they might go like it's easy for you because you've been to design school. You like it's easy. This process, I couldn't do that. But you were very uncomfortable from a young age all the way up until now. And you value that discomfort and that like putting yourself in that position where you've got to do something. Like that's I can tell it's something that stays on your mind because of the way you talk about your grandma and your family. Like it's something that is bred in you from that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I have nothing to follow up to what you just said, but
It was a
I
terrible
completely agree.
job by the host just to stop right there in that thing. It's just inspiring. It's just inspiring to me. It's just inspiring to me because of the like that that sort of attitude. People don't like to be uncomfortable, and it's something I'm passionate about, even in like working out, like fitness wise, health wise, their whole life. Like this isn't just like a one aspect thing. I just listened to an awesome podcast with a guy who wrote a book about being comfortable and how comfortable is like a demise. It's like, and it doesn't mean not have a house with a couch and air conditioning. And it doesn't mean that. That's not what you're talking about. It's like doing uncomfortable things, challenging yourself. Like not everything has to be easy. And when you challenge yourself, it makes you a better human being in life all the way around. Like it makes you respect things more
Absolutely.
and value things more.
Yeah. Yeah. And this might sound a little cliche, but my family always says nothing good comes from anything easy. I'm sure you've heard that before. And also, good times make soft men and hard times make great men and all the other collection of quotes, cheesy quotes that I have in my arsenal. But there is some level of truth in all that stuff that you read because I've had my share of friends that grew up very privileged, and it's really difficult to see them struggle to find their purpose in life. And as a matter of fact, I would say that I'm the luckier one because I've always had a purpose. Um, and now, at this age, I'm close to 30 as well. Seeing people that are so lost and they're trying so hard to find meaning, it's really tragic, a little bit depressing, because we're heading into this day and age where humans will eventually cease to have purpose with all the robots taking over, the artificial intelligence taking over. What exactly are we going to be doing on this earth? And it's more important now than ever to really define why you're on this planet and what you're going to do with the time that you're given. So I hope, to all the people listening, I don't want to be the person, giving you that spiritual lecture that Goalcast does, but I do want to urge, the listeners to maybe do a little bit of reflecting and ask yourself, what is it that I could do today that makes my time on this earth more valuable to myself?
It's a great question. And finding having a purpose, it doesn't matter what you do. You don't have to own your own business. You don't have to be rich. Having a purpose, that is the sole thing that keeps us running. Like that's what keeps us happy. That's what keeps us motivated. The depression goes up. Oh man, what's the name of the book? Shoot, it's a great book, and I let my daughter read it. He was a reporter that was with a bunch of military guys over there, and he was stuck in this little spot. And then he got PTSD kind of in the same way, I guess, like similar. I don't want to say it's exactly the same, but he started doing, he kind of switched his story over into why he felt the way he did, and he did research on it. And the sense of purpose. Like they were over there. It wasn't the killing or the violence. It's none of that thing that does this to them. It's that they miss their brothers that they're sitting there with, and it's their family. And in that moment, they have a purpose. They're protecting, they're guarding, they're attacking. They're like, this is their purpose. Their purpose is they have a job, and it's an important job. Like it's a life or death job. And so when you have that sort of purpose, it fulfills you, even though it's a dangerous thing. And like it fulfills you. And then when that's gone, like, what do you do with your life? Like, my purpose is gone. Somebody took my purpose from me. Like, I got to change gears. And so that's a very impactful thing to me, is to figure out and know and realize you have purpose. And that's in everything. Like, from cleaning your house to whatever it is you do in life, you've got a purpose, and realizing that purpose and that you have value makes you a very happy, confident, solid human being. I think that, like, you said that great. And like, to make watches that are going to go on somebody's wrist, that's going to make them very happy, that's unique, made out of something that's old that somebody was going to throw away, and you're bringing joy into other people's life by being able to look at that and smile, and then have a conversation piece at a party and all that good stuff, is a crazy good purpose. You're bringing joy to people.
Yeah. And, I'd like to also just wrap up by saying, my watch company is called Olympus Watch Co. For very good reason. We deliberated on this name for, I think, months before settling on it. It's called Olympus Watch Co., and the logo is a Pegasus, as a reference back to the journey of Pegasus, that rose, that, once he defeated Medusa, he had that journey where he flew from the underworld and made his treacherous, I forgot how many weeks journey up until he reached Mount Olympus, and that was his goal. And we created this company after Hurricane Harvey hit us. And that was one of the lowest points that Houston has ever had. And I was so inspired during that time watching all the people here, the Good Samaritans, just come out of their own houses, even though they lost everything. Mattress Mac came out, the Astros wrapped it up. Yeah, exactly. Astros. And it ended up becoming one of the proudest moments in Houston's history, because it showed us that doesn't matter what hits us, we're still going to overcome it. And so I hope that will wrap things up nicely and, give you a good idea of what this brand is about. It's a lot more than just a watch. It's a story. It's a sense of purpose. It's preservation, and it's rebuilding, and it's everything that's way beyond just the watch itself.
Dude, I'm sold. I love it. It's an awesome idea. It's fantastic. I dig the whole thing. You are an amazing individual. Like, I'm so glad. And like I told you on the phone, like we had that call earlier beforehand to kind of like get to know each other. And I'm like, I don't want to know a lot about your story. I like to find out on the fly. It's the first time I'm hearing it. It's amazing. Like, it's very inspiring. You definitely need to share this with as many people as possible. And because it'll make them believe that, some little girl will be walking around like, Jenna did it, I can do it.
I certainly hope so.
That's awesome.
I would love to share my story with anyone. And if it helps even just one person get over, their most difficult time in life, then that would mean the world to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this. Everybody go check out Olympus Watches. The tag's right there at the bottom. You can see it if you're watching on YouTube. I'll have a link in the show notes. Like I said, follow the Instagram page and you will see all my stories just pumping out pictures of this watches. And the link to the review on the watch will be on the podcast as well. And I'll try to pump that out on my Instagram and social media and whatnot. So thanks, Jenna. This is fun.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. Have a good night.